My name is Chevoy. I'm 53 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness and I am shunned.
All right, Chevoy. So how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
I always say I was born into it. I think the real truth of that is apparently I had one or two birthdays, my
Oh,
first and second birthday or Christmas, but because I don't remember it for all intents and purposes, I was born into it. And
gotcha.
I have three sisters. I'm the third, and we were all raised as Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, okay. It's interesting. There's a lot of people who have celebrated, that first birthday or whatever the case may be, or first Christmas, and then it tends to go away.
Mm.
Um, so, do you know? So, were your parents witnesses already? Were they
Uh,
this
my father,
generation?
my father became a baptized witness when I was around the age of 16 or 17. My mother was the one who became a Jehovah's Witness. My grandparents were never Jehovah's Witnesses, so she was the first person. She was married before, so her first husband actually died. So she was a young woman at that time. He was only 28 when he died. She was 26. She had my two older sisters. I'm sure it was a very hard time for her, and that was the perfect time for her to be, have a knock at the door and Jehovah's Witnesses over there. So I think even before I was born, she was maybe looking into it, maybe studying, but she certainly wasn't baptized. I think, and I don't know, I think she got baptized when I was maybe around 4.
Okay.
But all of that time, she had some connection to Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm assuming it was through study.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm.
It's sad a lot of times, again, back to there's a vulnerability, there's something that happens, and suddenly a person
Mm-hmm.
is looking for hope or some answers or to feel better, to escape, whatever the case may be, the vulnerability or the trauma. And Jehovah's Witnesses are always around, or you marry someone who's a witness, or whatever the case may be, or they're in your family, and then suddenly that seems very attractive, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
She was a young woman. It would have been very difficult for her, I'm sure, to have two young children. And at a time, I think back at that time, there wasn't a lot of financial help maybe from the government. So lots of things happening in that particular time where it would have been quite difficult. So, there they were to the rescue.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know I've heard people say how nice it is just to come into a Kingdom Hall for the first time with your, maybe it's a single mom and some kids, and everybody kind of rallies around. You get love bombed, and then the next thing, this person feels right at home, and people are offering to sit with their kids or to help them in some ways, and that's a big deal in a situation like that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Um, so for yourself, for all intents and purposes, being born in, what was the worldview that being raised that way gave you? How did you see the world around you, even as a little kid?
I think I was scared. I was scared of what was around. My mother was a very hard taskmaster. So she ruled the roost in the home, and she was very much into her religion. And there was only one way, and it was either her way or the organisation's way, whichever was she decided at the time. So, she was quite strict in the household. And yeah, I was brought up, I was a believer. I look back now and I go, did I really believe it, or was I scared? And that fear played a big part. And I really don't know, but I can remember being scared of all those pictures in, the Bible Stories book and the Red Live Forever book. And, they really sat over the top of me like they did for many people. And that just made me fearful of anything outside of the organisation, because everything outside of the organisation was painted as bad and evil and horrible. And so, yeah, that's really how I lived my life as a kid, I think, just being scared of what was out there because it was all so bad. And, it's funny, I spoke to my mother maybe 3 years ago and said, wow, those pictures in those books, they were horrendous. And I was horrified. She said, no, there were never pictures like that. I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? That that picture that every JW knows about, Armageddon and earthquakes and people falling into the cracks of the earth and people lying on the floor with blood and people stabbing each other. And I'm like, what? You don't remember those? She's like, no, we would never have those. I don't know what she's thinking. But that's the type of stuff you looked at and got told about at meetings.
Yeah. Nightmare fuel for a lot of children. And it's interesting how many times Jehovah's Witnesses are kind of a reflection of the God they worship as far as how it's presented in the organization. A hard taskmaster that demands that it's one way or no way. That there's a lot of black and white thinking, and it's very binary. And sadly also that denial of the realities, like the pictures in the books and such. One element of gaslighting is denying that a thing happened, even though you have proof. Yeah. And for so many of us I think a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses would deny that those things existed, but you can do a simple Google search and pull those images up. I mean, big dragons and people being swallowed up by the earth and falling into cracks during earthquakes and fire from the heavens. It's traumatizing to children. And I think you make a great point. It's the fear. The fear holds a lot of people in it.
Yeah. And I think you get comfortable in this uncomfortable being, this uncomfortable way of being. You get comfortable because you don't know, or you're scared of what else is out there.
Yeah, it's basically almost like being institutionalized.
Yeah. And certainly, my own personal circumstances in life kept me there in this state of discomfort, but there was comfort in being there. That sort of makes sense. It's paradoxical, but yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what if you grow up in Siberia, you have a certain set point for what temperature you're comfortable at. It's a lot different for the kid who's born in the Sahara Desert, right? A different set point for what you're comfortable with, because we grew up, a lot of us, in various types of abuse, and it becomes that's your norm. That's how you know how to live. For a lot of us, mentally and emotionally, spiritually. So yeah, it's tough. So you kind of touched on it just a little bit. So let's start with your home life. What was life like at home for you? You said that, it sounds like it was very strict. But what was that like for you? Just the temperature of the house, so to speak.
It's funny, my mother was the type of person that wore tea towels on her head and doilies on her head and all of that to show respect because her husband was around the house. But by the same token, she never took any notice of him and, was like, don't listen to him, listen to me. So she was unusual in that way. She sort of preached that respect, but it was her way or the highway, as I said before. And, she was very strict in terms of there was no flexibility there. There was a lack of flexibility in terms of our behaviour and what was expected of us. It was difficult. There was abuse in the family as well, which made that very difficult too. And, my sisters, my older sisters, one's 10 years older than me and one's 5 years older than me, and they both left home very early. And I can remember things like, my older sister actually ran away with her boyfriend. I can remember her actually running out of the house and going. And, my younger sister and I were told to go into the bedroom, shut the door, put on a record, play some music, and she was gone, and it was never talked about. She was, no, that's a lie. She was bad. She did the wrong thing. She's run off with a boyfriend and never talked about. And, at that time, what was I, 9? My younger sister was 7. That's hard. And then my other sister, she became pregnant as maybe a 16 or 17-year-old. So I was 11 and 12. And she left home, and that was it. We never, she was gone in 2. It was almost like a a chapter of a book was shut and they did bad things and that's it. And that's tough when you're a kid. And that was, we don't talk to them. And I think back now and I think my poor sister, she was 17 and she was pregnant. How can you just be left like that? It's awful. It's awful.
She was a kid herself.
She was a kid. And I look back now as a woman looking at that circumstance, which I didn't understand as a young girl. It was just sad. It was sad. But, I look back now and I know that that's because of what they also had to endure in their childhood, and they coped the best way they could. And part of that was leaving home and leaving everything. So I can see that now. Back then I didn't have that understanding. But, that was sort of how there was a lot of tension in the house. There was a lot of emotion. I was just trying to remember this morning, before my father became a baptized Jehovah's Witness, there was alcohol. I don't know if he was an alcoholic, but I know he used to drink a bit on the weekends, I think, so there were a lot of arguments and that type of thing around alcohol. So, it was tough at times. It was tough. It was hard. I remember when I was probably 11 or 12, I was in school, so in primary school, that's what we call it in Australia, and the teacher said to me, "Oh, your sister's here to see you," and that was my sister who was pregnant and had left home, and I hadn't seen her for months. So she came to the school to see myself and my younger sister, and so she took us out of the classroom and she gave me presents, a T-shirt, and chocolate, and it was sad. And the next thing I remember was the teacher rousing me, and I must have put my head on the desk and was crying. That's tough.
That's incredibly tough.
That was sort of how I remember my childhood. It was hard because it was hard. I think the only positive things I can remember is hanging out with other JW kids, at that age before you hit teenage years. I think I had a good social network outside of the family and had a lot of fun and went on holidays. So that I remember fondly, but the other stuff was hard, I think. My mother was obviously a product of her own upbringing and also the organisation's rules and the fact that she never fought for herself and still doesn't to this day as an 84-year-old woman.
It's really sad because I think that what happened with your sister, literally running away, running out of the house, and it was just kind of like, hey, why don't you just put some music on, act like the Titanic is not sinking, and let's just pretend everything is okay. And then afterward, let's just demonize the person that left and not talk about it. We're not going to certainly not give you as a little girl any mental and emotional support around the fact that you just lost your sister.
Mm-hmm.
That is shunning. That is what shunning is all about. It's you had like a little microcosm of that in your own home. It's here's an individual here today, gone tomorrow. Nobody talks about it. Nobody is given any tools to cope with it. Let's just deny and act like it didn't happen and press forward.
Yeah. And, I think that's probably maybe my earliest memory of that cloak of secrecy around stuff that happens in your family, and let's not tell anybody. And more than that, maybe the elders knew, because my mother would have gone to the elders, but was there any support from the elders? No. So maybe they knew, but in terms of getting some support from others, whether it be people in the congregation or whoever was thought to be the person who could help you, there was nothing. So once again, it's that cloak of secrecy which continues for years, and let's not tell anybody. Let's not tell anybody what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, that's sadly pervasive inside the organization in whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's just abuse in the family, someone disappears and there's disfellowshipped. There's no transparency, there's no answers. And it just really leaves a person, you're just left wanting. It just feels so empty around things that mean so much. And again, no real mental and emotional support being given, because they don't have it to give. They don't, like you said, they're products of that environment as well, or their own dysfunctional families or upbringing or their own trauma or whatever the case may be. And so it just, the pattern is passed down. So what about school? Was school a place then? I mean, you touched on it just briefly, but it was, you mentioned it, but it was like that it was school a place where you found any kind of respite at all? Did you find any relief?
I didn't think so, because I was, school was, we weren't encouraged to really have friends at school except for between 9 and 3, but don't see them on the weekends. So I never went out with kids who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses on the weekends, so it was very much, you sort of learnt that relationship was for that 6 hours, and let's not make it too deep. So let's have a very superficial relationship. And because I'm a quieter person anyway, I never had a lot of friends. So it would be 1 or 2 girls that I was friends with, and that was very superficial. And I think that's what you got taught to do, because you shouldn't be friendly with people who were outside of the organisation. I think I enjoyed school from an academic point of view. I'm quite academic. I think I was probably always around the top of the class, the top 5, but I very quickly learned mediocrity, because, being academic is not the way to go either. So, just sort of limit the expectations, especially as I got older. Wisdom with the world is foolishness with God. And so even though I knew that was my strength, that was something that I held back on as well, in terms of, my schooling, because I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. I wasn't going to go to university. I wasn't going to be able to do anything. So I sort of really sat back with that. And apart from that, I wasn't really sporty. So I didn't really have much to go to. So academia was the way I sort of went, and you had to limit that. I can remember as a very young girl being in trouble when I was probably 6 for not colouring in the Easter pictures. So I got in trouble by Mrs. Rumble, the teacher. And then in year 4, I was out in the hallway, sitting in the hallway doing nothing because I couldn't do Christmas stuff. And then maybe when I was 11, we had like an open day at school every year where parents could come in and have a look at your work. And I was one of the kids in the school drama about the Israelites. My goodness me. So just dressed in my Israelite garb, being laughed at by other kids at the school, because that's all I had to offer. So I think, as in primary school as a young kid, I think you just learnt the process. You learnt what you can do, what you couldn't do or shouldn't do. And then I think in high school, it was just more of the same, because I knew I wasn't going to university, even though I wanted to be a music teacher. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't do it. So I left school early. I didn't finish my schooling, and went straight into pioneering.
Wow. So you can see how the conditional relationships start even in school, right? Conditional love, conditional relationships are what Jehovah's Witnesses are all about. And that gets, from the time you're a child, that is put into your head as to how you relate to others. Really, even your relationship with your own talent, skills, ability, passions, that's conditional too. If it's not serving the greater purpose of whatever Jehovah's Witnesses have said is that greater purpose, then there's no use for it. It just kills me to hear someone who is bright and doing well in school, and then they're what's the point? Because it's frowned upon to even excel in school. It's so sad. And then I have to know, what kind of music were you into? You said you wanted to be a music teacher. Did you get to sing or play music? Was there anything there you had a passion for?
I did actually learn to play the organ and a bit of the guitar. Nice. So that's where sort of my interest came from. But I stopped doing that because, where do you go with it once again, So,
well, and it's not enough to just have fun with it, right? As Jehovah's Witnesses, fun without a purpose of serving Jehovah in some way or spreading the word is looked down upon. It's frowned upon. And, you know, someone who coaches a lot of people, it's hard for a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses to just let their hair down and be silly and have fun in everyday things. We can have fun on a big trip, or we got some big new thing, but just a everyday enjoyment and gratitude for life is difficult because we were taught to discount all of that. And it's just from an early age. And I hate that.
Yeah, you're so right, because I think, you know, I don't even know my mother now, you know, her likes and her dislikes and her humor, because everything was so serious. Unless it was for the organization or for God or for the Bible, then it wasn't worth doing. And, you know, I realize I think about my mother now, and I don't really know her. And, you know, that was taught to us. It's unless it's for that purpose, for that end purpose, then don't do it. And right. You're right. I think, you know, I've been taught to be serious, and it's taken a lot for me to get rid of that serious nature, and it still pops up all the time. Just to relax into things. It's hard because it's not part of what you're taught. Don't relax, because when you relax, you'll do things wrong. When you relax, you sin. When you relax, you forget God, you know. And so
it's just room for the devil.
Room for the devil. Yep. Satan will see it. He'll
yes. Yeah.
So I think, you know, pioneering wasn't for me, for the simple fact is I'm quiet. You know, nothing worse than asking a quiet person to go knock on doors. It's just not the type of thing I do. But I did it because what else was there? You know, I couldn't go to university. I couldn't go to Bethel as a single sister because, you know, goodness knows what that will do to all the men there, you know, and it'll be your fault. My mother said, don't you travel. It's too dangerous for a young woman on her own to travel. So then what was there to do? And after pioneering was marriage and children. That's it. That's it paved out for you. And you don't actually in some ways question it, which is really sad. That's what I find so sad now looking back. It's like I should afford it and I didn't. I just went with it, you know?
It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's not one. Being indoctrinated and brainwashed isn't an event. It's a journey, and that is done over time. From the time you're really young, so you wouldn't even think to necessarily express yourself or pursue things that you like because you're taught that those things are even valueless. You'll get to do that. You'll get to in the new system.
That's right.
Right. So you can have the things you want, but we're going to push it off until something magical, tragic, happens later in the future. And that's when you're going to get to be happy. That's when you can pursue music or, you know, for me, sports, whatever, you know, things that I like. Just not allowed to pursue that as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's very damaging to people. And
yeah, it's interesting because a number of years ago, I said to my mother again, you know, not being allowed to do further education. She said, the brothers have never said that. And once again, I thought, my goodness, you just don't, you're so narrow-minded. And she said, they've never said you cannot go to university. And I said, maybe they never said those exact words, but time and time and time again, you were told, don't waste your time thinking about worldly things. Do not. Why would you do that and put God second? You know, and so I said, this is what we were taught all the time from the stage. This is what they said. And I remember when I was a teenager, there was a family in the congregation. The parents had their own business and they were a bit looked down upon because of that, because they spent so much time in their business. And they had two girls who were the same age as me, and one went on to study nursing and one went on to become a dental technician. And I can just remember people going, we shouldn't mix with them, gossiping around them. You know, this is just one example of what, when people did step out and do something different, they were ostracized. They were ostracized, even though they were still Jehovah's Witnesses, and, you know, but you don't talk to them as much. You don't socialize with them. That's what happens when you do decide to go against the advice from coming from the stage,
Yeah, and we all knew that. So you can't,
yeah.
look, they're never going to come out in a watchtower. I mean, unless there's one out there in the past somewhere I don't know of. But they're not going to say, it's just like with music or movies, entertainment, it's a conscience matter. But then they're going to let you know what a Bible-trained conscience should be like. And so while they won't come out and say, thou shalt not go to college. And if you do, you're going to be shunned because it says so somewhere in the Bible, because they can't do that. Yeah. They're going to have talks where Tony Morris, a member of the governing body, has a talk where he's condemning higher education and saying that the better the university, the more dangerous it is.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's the culture versus the written word by word doctrine as borne out in their magazines. It's the culture they create, and they know exactly what they're doing, so that later it gives them plausible deniability when someone says, we were told we can't go to college. Oh, we never said that. Yeah, you did. We all know what you meant. We all know what you said. We all know what the talks were from the platform, but we don't have recordings of those so that we can give you word by word everything that was fed into our little brains.
Yeah, and it's just again, it's education by fear, and that fear of being shunned, maybe not officially through disfellowshipping, but shunned anyway, through people looking at you and go, we can't socialize with you. We'll say hello to you at the meetings, but that's all we'll do because you're actually not doing the right thing and you're tainted, and you'll lead us all down a bad path for sure. So, yeah, that's the message. We all know that's the message you got over and over and over again. So I was very susceptible and gullible to that message, of course.
Well, sure. And especially I think maybe even more so when we grow up in a household where someone is very rigid, or our parents have big emotions. We end up being people pleasers, trying to make them happy because we don't want to face whatever the outcome is of upsetting that apple cart. So let's just make sure everybody's happy. So we end up falling for all of this stuff because what's the alternative? It's survival.
Exactly.
What were you going to do? Run away at 7?
Exactly.
There's a point at which you just find yourself having to put yourself last over and over again. Again, it's back to gaslighting, making you feel like the crazy one, making you feel like you can't trust yourself so that you have to trust them because you're just a good for nothing slave of Jehovah. Do not trust your own heart. Do not lean upon your own understanding. Those phrases were put into our heads all the time so that we wouldn't trust ourselves or do anything we wanted to do, and we would do exactly what they wanted us to do, for our own good, right?
Yeah, that's right, for our own good. And I think that caused a lot of us when we were teenagers to really struggle because I always felt like you're being watched all the time. They're just ready for you to make a step out of line, and we were told how teenagers do all these terrible things all the time and, one step to the left and it's a downhill, slippery slope to, hellish behaviours and terrible things, So I think you spend a lot of time in these states of anxiety because you're a teenager. So obviously you're pushing boundaries and that's natural. But my goodness, there are elders everywhere. There are eyes everywhere watching you, or there are people who will dob on you. So either way, you've got no hope, So I remember even being in high school with one of my classes, there was another girl, a JW in there, and her father was an elder, a very strict elder. And I was scared. I was a good kid. I was a good teenager, all in all. I look back now and I think, oh my goodness, I did nothing, But I was so scared even to be in the same classroom as her because I thought she'll go back and tell her dad. It's all of these anxious moments that you have. I remember when I first started working part-time, I bought a yellow skirt for myself, and it was above my knee, not too far above my knee, but however above my knee. And I remember about a week later I came home and I said to my mother, I can't find my yellow skirt. She's cut it up. she's cut it up into tiny little pieces because it was so revealing. I'm like, okay.
And that is the only way to deal with it, right?
That's the only way to deal with it.
Destroyed.
Yes, and I had records that were broken over her knee and just thrown on our bed. So there was one, my sister had one actually, and it was an Australian rock band called Hoodoo Gurus. And because that rhymes with voodoo, broken. That's how my mother worked. I had another one, Paul Young, who had a hit, Wherever I Lay My Hat. Well, no, that wasn't the word. The words were wherever I lay my hand. How disgusting. Broken. And this just happened time and time and time again. And I just thought, so there was nothing you could do. There was no, pushing those boundaries, which is just a part and parcel of life, was slammed every time it happened. And I look back now, we did nothing. I remember once my sister and I and a couple of us went to this nightclub, but it was so tame. It was so tame. It wasn't really a nightclub. It was in Brisbane City, and we were home by 9 at night. So I think we were there from like 7 till 8, right, having a couple of dances, and came home, and my mother was screaming at the top of her lungs, and what were we doing, how we were being disgusting, so much so that one of my friends who left, like scared, came back the next morning with a bottle of valerian. My mother seeing if she'd like to take some herbal treatment to help. But, that was it. And it's just this teenagers filled with anxiety in terms of, what am I doing? Am I going to do the wrong thing? And am I going to be in trouble? And everybody's watching. And it's almost like people are waiting for you to do something wrong. Want to catch you.
They are. And, well, I guess a couple of things there. At first, I can't help but miss the contrast in your mom sees lyrics and such in songs that aren't there, but doesn't see all of the pictures in the Bible storybook or the Live Forever book that we know we were all exposed to. So it's very selective in the process of remembering things. But that, what you're talking about there, the way things were dealt with and the way you never knew, even if you didn't do something wrong, there was someone who always suspected you of doing something wrong. And I know, my mom raided my room 1,000 times when I'd be at school or spending the night at somebody's house, having a good time, come home and my stuff's all different because she's gone through and cleaned it up or organized it. She was looking for contraband. She did it all the time. I was at least smarter than my brothers. I hid mine better. They got caught, but she just always looking for things or always thinking that you had some improper motive or whatever the case may be, and you never knew when you were going to get in trouble for something. So it really creates a lot of hypervigilance, a lot of anxiety, a heightened sense of your surroundings at all times.
And it stops you growing as a person.
It stunts us very much.
It stymies your growth as a person because you're so scared to be you. Mm-hmm. So scared to step outside of that and go, okay, who am I in the world? And here I am learning to be me. You don't do it.
Well, you can't have a cult and allow other people to be themselves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I just remembered. I also had quite a lot of depression as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, and my mother's response to that is to bring elders in. My mother, I can't deal with it. I'm bringing in the elders. So I remember many times, here I am, a 17-year-old young woman with depression, and an elder, never married, no children, coming in to a 17-year-old girl who's depressed, opening up a Bible and reading and trying to help me. What? How does that even, and why would my mother think that was a good response to somebody going through something, But that is her only response, and remains this day her response to issues, So I don't know.
So let me ask you, so you obviously ended up pioneering, so you got baptized at a point. So when did you get baptized, and what was the lead up to that? Was there anything you enjoyed in any of that process, or were you just doing the things that you thought you were supposed to do?
I did it because it was the right thing to do.
Yes, the one prescribed
I
path.
don't even think I even thought about it.
Yeah.
I did not even think about it because I didn't know what else was out there. There was nothing else out there in my mind. So it was just what you did. So I think I got baptized at 15 or maybe 16. I can't quite remember. But it was just what you did. And when your friends are getting baptized, well, I suppose I better get baptized. Don't want to be left out. That was it. That was as far as my thought processes went. And, you know, I was clever enough to know, I can't even remember the questions they asked now, but if there's biblical questions, I could answer them in terms of what the Bible said. So I was clever enough to know to answer correctly. That's all they needed. They were just ticking boxes.
Yeah, it's not about who you are or anything like that. It's just, can you answer these questions and convince three men that you're ready to get dunked in water and to sign a forever contract with a cult?
That's right, exactly. And then straight on to regular pioneering. And that was just the next step as well because, you know, and the more menial part-time job you had, the better, funnily enough. So if you could pick a really menial job, you were looked on as being great. That was it. That was as far as I could go.
Well, again, you know, so is it really a choice if there's only one choice that is viable, you know, and when you grow up, I think the term is undue influence is often used in court cases and such like that as a legal term. You know, people will always say, well, you chose to get baptized. Yeah, at 13, 14, 15, I did the one path that was available to me, and that if I didn't do, would have caused ostracism and all those people watching you. There's not a choice. We didn't choose anything. There was no other choice. Some people happen to be able to hold out long enough to turn 18 and get away. But the pressure really ratchets up from parents and the congregation the closer you get to, well, here in the United States, I should say, 18 is the legal age. I don't know what it is in Australia. 18, okay. And the pressure really ratchets up. So, I mean, there's no choices. You're exposed to nothing else.
Yeah.
We had no idea what was out there.
What had happened to my older sisters because they made a choice. And I think they were both baptized at the time, so they got disfellowshipped. So because I saw what happens when you don't follow the rules, well, then you're scared of that. You're scared of that because you don't have any skills. You're not taught any skills to go out there on your own, which is really sad.
So again, it's binary. You're either with us or you're against us.
Yeah, exactly.
And those are heavy, heavy options for a child, which you are when you get baptized at 15 or 4. I think I was 14. You're just a kid. Go outside at a park and there's a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid there. Have a look at him and say, is this person ready to make a lifetime decision of any sort? I mean, heck, look at adults and ask the same question. A lifetime decision. That's a difficult thing for most people. So you got baptized, and then were you one who started like auxiliary pioneering and doing things like that right away in the summers when you were off school, or did you wait till you graduated? And
I waited until I finished school, and then I went straight into regular pioneering, unless you had to do a few months auxiliary before that. I can't quite remember now if there were rules around it, but I was a regular pioneer for 4 years. So
for how long?
4 years.
Oh, for 4 years.
Yeah, so I moved to another place with another few girls. So we sort of moved away probably when I was 18. Kept doing it at the age of probably around the same time. I'm not sure. My timelines are out sometimes because I've just squashed it all for years. My sisters told my mother about the sexual abuse at the hands of my father, so what had happened to them. So they came back as adults and told her. And that was handled very badly, of course. Not handled at all. I think elders were told. What else? What else happened? Who knows? But, you know, basically, I think my mother denied it at the time. I still, to this day, don't know whether she knew or not. He denied it first off. It had also happened to me when I was younger, but I saw what happened when they told her, and I chose not to say anything at that point. So I never told my mother until the last few years, because nothing happens. And she stayed with him because it was the right thing to do, and he was sorry, and Jehovah wants her to stay with him. It's years of, you know, horrible stuff, but I think because of what happened all around that time, and, you know, I'm 20 or so, or 19, 20, then I started going through my own stuff, of course, and struggling. So I ended up meeting a guy at work. He wasn't a JW. He became one for me, poor guy. So we got together, got married. I look back now, we're divorced now, so I'm married to my second husband. But, you know, I look back now and I'm sad for us both, really. He had his own baggage as a young man. I had absolutely no life skills in terms of relationships, and we were together trying to work things out, and it never worked out, of course. I have two beautiful children from that marriage, but, you know, it never worked out. So that whole time, you know, my early 20s, I got married at 24, which was quite late. You know, they're all getting married.
Jehovah's Witness, yes.
18 was the time to get married.
Old maid.
I was late to get married at 24. I hung on for a while. But yeah, I went into that with no skills. I look back now and I just think, you knew nothing about relationships.
Well, no. Jehovah's Witness marriages are set up for failure from the beginning.
Exactly. And you know, you have a problem, what do? Read more of the Bible, pray more, go to the meetings, go witnessing more. That's the answer for every problem you have. And I just go, no, actually, that didn't cut it. That didn't work. You know. So
well, yeah, the qualifications for getting married is this person that you're interested in? Do they answer at the congregational meetings and raising their hand? Do they go out and field service regularly? Can they, you know, recite Matthew 24:14? You know, it's silliness like that. And it's nothing about, are you two compatible as people? Are you compatible in communication style, sexuality, the way that do you like each other's friends? You know, it has nothing to do with who two individuals are. It's just, are you good cult members? And if you are, then hey, you're male, you're female, because that's all it's allowed. And boom, there you go.
Yeah, and he went on to be an MS, so he was doing what he had to do, and he was up on stage giving talks. So as far as that's concerned, he ticked all the boxes. But I know now that was my escape in some ways, getting married, of all this turmoil, all this emotional turmoil that just never got resolved.
Was that your escape? Did you continue pioneering as well?
No, I didn't. I don't know. I don't think I was a pioneer when I got married, or maybe I was just for a few months later. So, you know, it wasn't an escape from pioneering. It was an escape from my family situation. And just, even though I wasn't living at home for those few years beforehand, it was just all that emotional turmoil and having to get away from it and thinking I could start afresh or start anew in my own relationship. And, you know, didn't do that very well either.
That's a really good lesson, though. You know, a lot of people want to, let's say, leave Jehovah's Witnesses and think, oh, I'm just going to leave and I'm just going to make new friends and start a new life, and boom, go ahead and live that life. And you have to deal with the trauma of everything you've been through, or it's just going to follow you through. And it may even ruin some of what you're trying to do or hold you back, or you won't see ways you're repeating patterns from the past that are, now coming into new relationships or career opportunities, or just an inability to let go and have fun, or whatever the case may be, right? And so you can't escape into a relationship or anything else. We do, at some point, we have to do the work when we're ready. We're all ready at different times, but we have to do the work to work through what happened to us. And we don't always get to pick and choose when that is.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, what's okay.
Because I remember being married. So I think I was only newly married at the time. And I went to the elders and I said, this is what happened to me. I suppose I was looking for some assistance, or because, also don't go to psychologists and don't go to counsellors. That was also a rule that we don't do that, because I'll tell you something that, goes against God's word. So the elders were my option, my only option again. So I remember going to them and saying, this is what happened to me and it's traumatic and I'm hanging on to it. And they said to me, well, it's finished now, isn't it? I said, yes. They said, okay, forget about it. And that's what they told me to do. And foolishly I went, okay, all right.
What's your other alternative?
Yeah, because that came from God. That came directly from God. Forget it. And I went, okay. And of course, it didn't work. It doesn't work. And so that impacts everything you do.
You don't have to answer this question if you don't want. When you told your mom what happened eventually later in life, did she then, now all, I guess, of her kids are saying that this has happened. Did she, and at different times, was she amenable or open, I guess I should say, to that reality, or was she still closed off?
Before I told her, she eventually accepted my other two sisters, what they said about it. It took a while, but she was never, it was always with a but. Okay, but. So it was never really an acceptance. And the fact that she stayed with him was not enough. So he died in 2017. And I went up to my mother's to help her, and I told her after he had passed. And her answer was, but apart from that, it was good, wasn't it? And that was her answer. Oh. And I went, the rest doesn't matter. The rest doesn't matter because of that, Okay, we went on holidays. Woohoo, that doesn't matter. And really, what all of us, and I don't want to speak for my sisters, so I'll just say for me, but I'm assuming maybe my sisters too, all of us really wanted her to say, I'm sorry, that's crap, and leave him. Because as I said to her when I told her, your Jehovah would never have expected you to stay. God of love would have never expected you to stay with that man. Oh, no, but he was repentant. Okay, whatever. Then let him get on with it. But, she couldn't accept that's what we wanted from her. That's what you wanted to. Maybe she couldn't stop it when it happened. Mm-hmm. Maybe she didn't know. I don't know. But she could have shown her support by going, I'm out of here. And she
I imagine it would have just been nice to even get to feel seen and heard and validated. Even I think there's almost a measure of Stockholm syndrome there, identify with your captor, so to speak. You see that, even in the organization, people know that you live in Australia, land of the Australian Royal Commission's, investigation into institutional response to child sexual abuse. And I think it's just, they just deny that that even happened, or they'll, if they will admit that the ARC even happened and that things came out, they will say things like, well, yeah, but I mean, it's still the truth. It's still the best way of life. You know, things are going to happen, whatever. It's like, but you're still not acknowledging it, and you're doing nothing about it, and you won't go to the police. You know, there's so many different things that come into that. It's just, it's at the end of the day, it's just hardcore denial.
Yeah.
And living as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, as you've already kind of talked about, is it's a life of denial, denying your own abilities, interests, who you are, what you want, and then denying the things that are going on around you because that's how they like it.
Yeah, and I think, all of this is, over the years, is what eventually made me leave, was this. The fact that it happened is one thing and horrendous, but the way it was dealt with and this cloak of secrecy again, and me reaching out, for example, to those elders and getting nothing and going, okay, and that secrecy being perpetuated, it breaks you down, and it's terrible for your soul. All of us as sisters have suffered and gone on to get our own way out of that situation, and it's been psychologically hard for all of us in our own different ways. We've struggled, and we're coming out of it, and as a group we come together, but it disgusts me at how there was nothing there for us. And I was the last, out of the 4 sisters, I was the last to leave. So I was the golden child for a while. So I left at the age of 32. So my other sisters had left in their teens. They all came back at some stage and then left again. But I was sort of held on until the age of 32. And my mother wore the label of martyr very well. So, you'd go to meetings or to assemblies and people would come up and say, oh, hello, who are you? And how many children do you have? And my mother would look and say, oh, I have 4, but 3 are disfellowshipped. And, oh, that's terrible. And they'd look at me and they go, oh, thank goodness you're still in for your mother. And, wearing that whole label of martyr, just people love to do it, and I feel like when my father died, I went up there for my mother to help her, and I decided to go to the funeral, as did my younger sister. My older sisters did not want to, and that's fine. And I only really went there for my mother to support her. And my sister and I fantasized. We dreamt about it, and we talked about it, and we laughed about it, and we got really angry about going into the funeral and standing up and storming the stage and saying, because what a lovely brother he was. You want to know what he was really like? And just saying, why on earth, there was so much trauma, and you look down upon these people who have left your organisation, but you did nothing to help them. And now you just talk about what a wonderful man he was and what a wonderful brother, and my mother keeps that fast going, and we wanted to storm the stage and say, we'll tell you what he's really like, but we didn't. And we didn't, because we're nice people, but we talked about it, and we quite enjoyed the whole process of going through that in our heads. But, and there were times when my mother, I remember her saying, oh, your father wants to tell so-and-so who were close friends of them about his past. She goes, oh, thank goodness he didn't. And I just felt like going, well, if they're Christian, they should be accepting of his repentance. But of course they're not, because what he did was disgusting, and they don't like that type of thing, just goes on and on and on. And people just get stuck in this terrible place of not being able to express themselves. And if they try to look for that help, it's not there. And that's hard.
Yeah, I think that's, as frustrating. It's frustrating enough to not be able to have your own voice and to not be able to say what you want to say. But then to be able to say it, to be able to get the words out and then be denied, or have someone not believe you, or try to refute you, or tell you your feelings are wrong, or whatever the case may be, it's just so invalidating, and it's just further abuse on top of the previous abuse. Which gets back to what I say a lot of times. Jehovah's Witnesses I mean, not only do they create and cause problems, but they make there's no problem that they can't make worse.
Yeah.
They can make just about anything worse in the end.
Yeah.
And I'm, I don't know if your mom can say it or not or whatever, but I'm sorry that happened to you. And I know anyone watching or listening would feel the same. And to you, your sisters, just so many other people, it's horrendous. We believe you if no one else does. And we know sadly that it happens far more, I think, than we even realize, even in our wildest dreams.
Yeah.
And I would never throw shade at anyone who ran up on a stage and said what they had to say either, because I mean, it's just, everybody deals with this stuff in their own way. I can only imagine how much fun it was fantasizing about that.
It was. And maybe that helped us to process some stuff as well. So
I bet it did.
Because going into, like I said, I went up there to help my mother when he passed away, to help her with arrangements. And I walked into her house and there was an elder there and he completely ignored me. And I was so disgusted and angry by the fact that you could be so rude. You could be so rude at a time when I was just there to support my mother. How dare you? And he's organising the funeral and I'm like, I'll be here. I'll organise it all. And I just thought, don't you dare push me out again. Don't you dare ignore me again. And so I refused to be ignored in that. So I felt
good for you.
I felt good about that.
Yeah, good for you. Well, you're finding your voice. You're making, you're going to listen to me one way or another, and if it's, how can you shun someone around the death of parents or anyone else or whatever? Like, that's the time to be petty and stupid? And, shouldn't that be the time to support someone or show that that's not love at all? And anyone that can call that love, my goodness. Yeah. It's so warped and distorted. So
I started sort of going through this process of, when I was married and just everything just building up and coming up to, the forefront for me and not being able to deal with it, and then starting to see all the holes in the organisation and the lack of love. And at the same time, here I was shunning my two older sisters because they're no longer Jehovah's Witnesses, and just feeling like I'd lost stuff. And then it's terrible to say, but I used my children when they were young to not go to meetings. They're sick. I couldn't come, they're sick. Because,
oh, sure.
For goodness, you don't say, I don't want to go, because you'd have elders knocking at your door. Mm-hmm. So, they were my excuse for not going witnessing, for not going to meetings. My children aren't well, blah, blah, blah.
Hey, and no shame in that. I understand.
Just this slow process of trying to get out. I'm ashamed to say, and I won't go into detail, but I did something to get myself disfellowshipped because I actually found I couldn't just walk away because they'd chase you. They'd be on top of you. They'd be hounding you. They'd be, and so I did something that I should never have done. But anyway, it is what it is, and I'm okay with that now. But
well, I mean, if you've listened to the podcast, you know that people get pushed up against, it's the desperation to make this all stop through any means necessary. And it's hard for people who've never had their voice to have their voice and to be able to stand up in that way. So oftentimes people end up behaving in some sort of a way that gets them shunned as a way out because they don't know how to. When were we ever taught to advocate for ourselves? We were taught the opposite, to never advocate for ourselves. So people find ways to do that. It is what it is.
Yeah. Anyway, my marriage broke up at that time. I had 2 little kids and, it was really hard, As most people know, when they're shunned, you just lose everything overnight, like everything. I had not one friend in the world. I had, and not only that, you're not only by yourself, because I was 32, so I'm a woman, but not only am I by myself, I'm just so, you have no self-worth. You're nobody without God or the organization, so that's what you're told, and you're just filled with guilt and shame. And my life ran, I think, for the next 5 years easily just on guilt and shame. It was horrible. Not only was I felt shame and guilt over my marriage breakup. I had 2 young children. That in itself is terrible to deal with. And then this on top, where this guilt and shame, that's this big, heavy cloud that just sits over you. And I didn't go to counsellors, partly because it was never in my, it was something we didn't do, but also if I go, how do I actually articulate this? How do I tell somebody and they not look at me like I'm crazy? So I thought I could do it by myself, and I didn't do it. I struggled for years.
It's difficult
because I had emotional dysfunction. I had no coping skills. I had 2 little kids, and unfortunately, probably have given them scars as well because of my emotional dysfunction. I'm trying to just work my way through this life where I had just felt like I'd fell down this big black hole.
Well, yeah. And first of all, going to therapists or counselors can be difficult if they don't understand the lingo. I mean, you have to almost educate them on what it is, which is difficult to begin with. But I mean, let's talk about the shame. As we often talk about on the podcast, guilt is I did a bad thing. Shame is I am a bad person because I did a bad thing. And it's the latter. It's shame. It's feeling like you're a terrible person. And I don't think that there's anyone here who would look at you and the circumstances that you've been through and classify you as a terrible person for whatever you've done in your life. None of us, we're not terrible people. We were very, very hurt people who have been traumatized in just about any and every way imaginable. And sure, some of us have done or said or whatever, some things we're not the proudest of in our life, but it doesn't make us a bad person. It just means we were hurt, and that was our way of dealing with the pain, in the moment. Because there weren't a lot of where were the healthy options? It's like, going into well, McDonald's is never going to sponsor me anyway. It's like going into McDonald's and looking for the healthy food, right? Like, it's not there. And I do like McDonald's, so it's not there. It's just, you're not going to find it there. So there's no action you can take in there that is going to result in something that's probably going to move you in an upward trajectory, and there's not either, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, being raised in a family where your mom is clearly very mentally and emotionally abusive, where your dad is sexually abusive I'm sure mentally and emotionally as well. That comes along being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, if nothing else. Living your whole life in a cult that is telling you that you're nothing and you're worthless, and that all your thoughts are bad and all your feelings are bad. How are you even going to feel worthy of going to someone and thinking that person's going to care about you enough to help, when everyone you've gone to for help your whole life has dismissed you, has told you it's your fault because you're a bad person and a sinner and you're evil or dirty or whatever? It makes sense. I think that's why so many people have a hard time reaching out for help, because why would you? When would that have ever gone well? Allow me to break in here for a second. This channel is made possible by you, the listener. If you appreciate what we're doing here, please consider supporting at patreon.com/shunned, or leave a review on iTunes or other platforms. Like and subscribe. All those things help the channel. If you're looking for merch, you can go get some Shun swag from the shunnedpodcast.com website or reach out there to be on the show. If you're looking for more ex-Jehovah's Witness content, I'll recommend my first podcast called This JW Life. You can find that on podcast apps as well as YouTube. And if you're feeling stuck in life, struggling to find happiness and community, maybe you're haunted by the past, beating yourself up, unsure of who you are or what you even want out of life now that you've lost this one identity that was given to you by a cult, reach out through my other sites like ex-JWhelp.com, that's exjwhelp.com, or storyworkscoaching.com. And let's see about working together to help you find a life that fits you and who you are, maybe for the first time ever. And now, back to our guest.
I suppose for me, it's been years of really, it's taken years for me to face stuff. And I'm glad I've done it. It's taken a bit longer, but I suppose for anybody listening, if you can do it earlier, do it, because somewhere along the line you have to deal with it. And, just putting it into a little box and pushing it down, it's still there. It's still there, And I got breast cancer in 2005, and I'm a big believer that that was very much related to my emotional state. I believe that myself, that has an impact on your body in some way. And, for me, I think that was probably it.
Well, certainly whether it caused it or not, I mean, how could it not exacerbate it?
Mm-hmm.
I am lactose intolerant, and my wife and I used to go out every Sunday and we'd go to this little place for ice cream and stuff. We used to do it, especially in the summer. After the whole thing with the disassociation and everything, I'm at the point now where I can't eat dairy, period, almost. And it's just, that develops along the time with all the stress of disassociating, of finding out the truth about the truth, of waking up to the realities of it all. Those kinds of traumas have an impact on us in some way. I will never have cheese again. I will never, I can eat it a little bit, but it's just, it has major, major impacts, not just psychologically, but physically as well.
Yeah. It was interesting because I was 37 when I got breast cancer. And so my mother started talking to me again at that time because I was unwell. And I remember her coming down because I was living in Sydney at the time, and she said, I've got to come and help you because you're not well, the kids are small. But I just want to let you know that one of the elders said, you should never do that. You should never go and help her. She's just fellowshipped. And I'm like, number one, why tell me that? It's almost that martyr thing again, but I'll do it for you.
It's so that you will look at her as so special and worthy of more praise or love because of it.
And also what happened, my two sisters who I'd shunned up until, however long before that, were at my doorstep helping me, and I just thought, well, there's love,
And your sisters didn't say that they were there against advice of others or...
No.
You mean they didn't guilt you or shame you about it?
No, funnily enough, not.
Amazing that we can help people without guilting them or shaming them.
Yeah, and and they're such evil people too, and they were so nice. How does that even happen?
Well, I mean, you can take that all the way back to that moment in school when your sister showed up with the gifts. I mean, that's a beautiful moment. It's a very sad, bittersweet moment in reflection, but it's so great that they can forgive you.
The love's always been there, and I'm very grateful for that. So, from that point onwards, I was with my husband at that time. We weren't married, but he was there. He was in my life as well. And from that time onwards, I sort of had this on-off relationship with my parents. So I was disfellowshipped the whole time. She would call me. I would talk to her. I would sometimes go up and see her, and I think it was like, because I'd been sick, she sort of held on for a while there. If I didn't hear from her, I figured they'd gone to an assembly. So then I would wait for a couple of months. The kids were small, so I think that was also her excuse for, support the kids. So it was on and off. And I think that's worse in some ways, this cold, warm sort of relationship that was never, ever really an authentic relationship, ever.
Well, no, and it's cold and warm usually. I don't know if this is the case in your case, but it's all at the Jehovah's Witnesses' discretion. So they will choose if it's cold or warm. Yes. And so you're always caught in a relationship where you're chasing someone else's love, trying to earn it, hoping that you'll get it. And they're constantly, they giveth and then they taketh away, right? And it just keeps you on the hook. Again, another aspect of gaslighting, but it's not love, it's manipulation.
And it's not healthy. And it got to the point where if I saw her name come up when she was ringing, I felt sick. I didn't want to talk to her. But at the same time, I did want to talk to her. You know, it was just, it's not nice. But then if I went up and visited it, there was nothing to talk about. She wasn't interested in my life because it wasn't a Jehovah's Witness life. There was nothing to tell her. You know, I couldn't tell her I was organising a birthday party, you know, because she's not interested. Couldn't tell her about my work. She's not interested. And I'm not interested in listening to her just talk about the Bible and Watchtower and, you know. So there was nothing authentic there. And I think that's sad, you know, that there couldn't be anything there that we had commonalities around outside of religion. There was nothing.
Well, and I think that gets back to what you said earlier. Jehovah's Witnesses are Jehovah's Witnesses. That is their identity. It's everything that they are. And they don't usually have a lot else to talk about. I went through the same thing with my parents when, before we left, we had come to an agreement to at least not talk about Jehovah's Witness related things anymore. But we would just go over there and have nothing to talk about. You know, Jenny and I would talk about things. They couldn't have cared less about any of those things. And they had nothing to talk about if they couldn't talk about what was going on in the congregation or the latest congregation gossip or whatever the case may be. There was nothing to talk about. They had nothing in their lives. They're not whole individuals. It's a very empty life. And so you have now clearly, but even at that time, you had outgrown them. You had grown to places that they couldn't go anymore. Yeah.
And, you know, I suppose I tolerated my father. You know, I didn't have a relationship with him at all. My mother thought he was wonderful because he refused to take on any responsibilities like being an MS, even though he was asked, but he wouldn't do it. How wonderful of him.
Was that playing the martyr? Was he said like?
Because of his past, yes. So, you know, and I just think, I don't know, this whole thing is just weird. It's like going into some type of vortex. It's weird.
It's an alternate reality. It's not the real world. It's this altered state. It's very ill, very sick.
It is. But so what I ended up doing, after he passed away, I spent a bit more time with my mother. I'd go up. I'd have to fly up and see her. And I'd do that, help to sort of with arrangements and that type of thing, getting some help. And I'd sort of be the only daughter that would have contact with her, and that's fine for the other three, completely their decision and understandable. And I just said to my hubby, look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to call her once every 3 weeks or so just to make sure, because she can't drive. She's old. She's over 80. Just to make sure she's okay, she's being looked after, somebody's coming to pick her up to take her to the doctor, that type of thing. Just a welfare check, I suppose. And I thought, you know, I'll do it because I'm a nice person. That's what I do, you know. So I'll keep that sort of relationship with her. And that was sort of okay for a while. And then in 2019, the International Convention, Love Never Fails, happened in Melbourne, which is in Victoria, and there was going to be a protest. So I had been watching this on Facebook, and I said to Sean, my husband, they're going to do a protest. He's like, let's go. And I'm like, oh, no, there's no way I would go and do a protest. So I think there were about 44,000 JWs going to that convention. And he's like, oh, no, you should. And I'm like, no, But I kept looking at this Facebook page and kept looking at it and watching it. And so I kept getting drawn to it. And I thought, oh, wow. And he said, come on. I said, no. And then I thought, why don't I want to do it? I was adamant I didn't want to do it. And I realized I was just scared. I was very scared about it.
Sure.
I was scared about, having that voice.
We were intimidated our whole lives by this organization.
Am I going to see people I know? And, so it's, even talking about it now, my stomach's going a bit, but eventually I said, okay, we'll do it. It was right at the last minute. So booked our accommodation, booked our flights, went, okay, we'll do it. And Sean was very excited. And then so I kept watching the Facebook page, and then they were saying, okay, we're going to have T-shirts if you want them. I'm like, there's no way I'm wearing a T-shirt, because on one side it said, I escaped Jehovah's Witnesses, ask me how, or ask me questions. And on the back it said, love never shuns, which is a play on love never fails for the convention theme. And I said, there's no way I'm going to wear a T-shirt. I'll go, but I'm not going, I'll just sit back. And then right at the last minute, I saw them say, okay, the order's shut this afternoon. I went, all right, I'll buy two, one for him, one for me. I said, Sean, but I'm not going to wear it, I don't think. So I packed it in the bag and went down. And before I mentioned to a friend that I was going to be part of this protest. And I said, oh, gosh, I'm not going to tell my mother. Do you imagine? And my friend said to me, I want you to think about that. She said, why don't you empower yourself and tell your mother? And she said, and also allow your mother the time to think about it rather than being told by a Jehovah's Witness. So thank you, Nat, for that. So I sat with that and I thought, okay, she's probably right. But I did wait till the 11th hour to tell my mother. And I said, I'm going down to Melbourne next weekend. The convention's on. And I heard this pregnant pause. She must have been going, oh, how exciting. She's going to go to the convention. And I said, and I'm protesting. And she went, oh. And I just left it at that. And I said, I'm protesting for me. I said, it's for a purely selfish reason because I think it'll be really cathartic for me to do that. And she left it and she went, oh, okay. And so I went, and it was probably one of the best things I've done. It was scary. All in all, there was probably, if I think back, maybe 50 to 70 of us over the 3 days, but we'd come and go. It was a silent protest in terms of we weren't shouting anything or saying anything, but we did have big banners that we were holding up. I did write down what some of them were. So some of the banners was shunning kills and love saves. You shouldn't have to choose between beliefs in your family. Child abuse is a crime, not a sin. And then 1,006 child abusers, over 1,800 victims, none reported. So that was in relation to the Royal Commission. So there were all banners there that we could walk around with. And I was scared when I was there, and I said, Sean, I don't know if I can do it. I felt sick. Walking up from the train station down to the stadium, I could see all the Jehovah's Witnesses heading towards, with their little name tags on that we all used to wear, heading towards the convention site. And I was really scared. And because it was a protest, we had to register it with the police. So there was police presence there, and that was like a couple of police people that just had to sort of stand around. We were very relaxed. We just set ourselves up. We couldn't go into the area that they'd hired in any way. So we were sort of just sitting outside of the convention centre. So they'd come out sort of at the end of the day or for lunch. And around that space was all public space. And so we were just sat there. People who were not Jehovah's Witnesses would be walking past, and they'd sort of inquire sometimes. And then during the breaks, their morning teas and their lunches, we'd sort of walk around just holding these placards and say nothing. I got more brave by the third day compared to the first day. But a couple of things that happened that I do remember is both Sean and I are sign language interpreters, And we were walking back after we'd finished one afternoon up towards the train station. We're chatting to each other. We had the blue T-shirts on. I didn't end up wearing it. And there were a group of deaf people who were from New Zealand, JWs, and they looked at us and they said something quite derogatory in sign language, obviously assuming that we would not know what they said. And my husband just went up to him and said, "Hi," in sign language, And they're like, "Oh, he's signing." He's like, "Are you all deaf?" And they answer him, "Yes." And he goes, "What did you say just before?" And they sort of started to panic and they're like, oh, nothing. And I just thought, wow, that was it was funny in a way because he just caught them out being
really, oh, yeah, that's funny.
Having a go at us, and so they had nothing to say after that point. So that was interesting. And what I was interested in and also really horrified by was the reactions of JWs. I just interested, and there were some people that obviously were sort of on the edge of whether they believe or not, and they'd come up, and some people just walk past you and give you a smile and a thumbs up. Other people, there were a couple of people that came up and said, "Oh, you're doing good work." So they might have been thinking about things themselves. But there was this very heavy presence of elders, security, whoever they were, in their fluoro vests, just watching all the time, talking into their walkie-talkies. It was very heavy-handed from their point of view, And, at any one time, there was probably 30 of us at the most. But apparently there were a few people inside the convention who were sending messages out because they had friends who were protesting and were saying, there's lots of gossip going around that we graffitied toilets inside the convention hall and we were planning to storm the stage at some time. And like, oh my goodness, can you believe this? It was
so threatening. Talk about playing the martyr, right?
Yeah. Anyway, towards one afternoon, I decided from the convention up to the train station was a very wide path. It would have been 6 meters, 10 meters wide. And I thought, this is what I need to do. So I just stood in the middle of it holding up the placard about child abuse, about, none being reported, 1,800 victims that we know of, none being reported to the police. And I just held that up. And that was really cathartic for me to do that. That was my voice there. And
so you just, are you saying you were holding it basically in the middle of where everyone had to go to get to the train?
Yeah, there were a few exits, but we would have had 20,000 come through our exit easily.
Good for you.
I just thought, here I go, this is me. And first off, I had the placard over my face, and then I got brave and put it up, and I thought, okay, if you see me and if I know you and if you know me, here I am, hello. So I felt for me, it was a very brave thing to do. And I felt so good afterwards doing it. I felt like I had said what I needed to say, silently, but a lot was said there. And what saddened me was I saw some kids go, "Mum, what's that say?" "Shh, shh, shh. They're the devil," right? Heard that, they're the devil. And people, the majority who just did not look at what was written there. And it is because you cannot look and not think of something. You cannot look and not, in your head, make a decision about that.
I guarantee you they were told inside not to look.
Yeah. Because
I'm sure they said from the platform not to look.
Yeah, for sure. Because you would be moved by that. It would at least make you go, oh, is that real? I need to look at that. If you had any type of humanity about you,
Oh, yeah, it shouldn't be threatening for someone to say there's a problem where your children are being hurt and no one cares inside this organization. That shouldn't be a threat. Every member there who walked by it should be upset about that and want to see change.
Exactly. That's right. So I thought, wow, that had a huge impact on me. But at the same time, that time when I stood in the middle before that happened, the convention was just finishing. You could hear the last song, And then all of these elders, security guards, whatever they were in their yellow fluoro, stood in this long line in between us and people moving out. Very, very confronting, very adversarial. There was no reason for that to happen. We weren't doing anything. We weren't shouting. We were doing nothing. We were very, very peaceful people, just standing there, holding placards. And they stood up. There would have been, I don't know, maybe 70 of them all up there.
I've seen the video. It is confronting.
Yeah. And so one of the protesters went up to the police and said, "We can walk through them, right?" He's like, "Of course you can. They shouldn't, they can't stop you doing anything." So then people started getting brave and just saying, "Excuse me," and just walking through these people.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, because what can they do? But I just thought, wow, you're really trying to control us and trying to threaten us, albeit quietly. There was no need for it. There was no need for it at all. And
no, it's intimidation.
Intimidation, exactly. And I thought, what have they told the witnesses inside? What have they told that they're saving them from? These brothers will go out and will make this line, so you will be saved from whatever the rubbish is they told them. And they would have told them some rubbish in there.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, yeah. So the whole thing was I was on a high at the end of it because I just felt I'd done something for myself that was big for me. I had before then told a few people about my life, but that was a big statement for me, and I was very, very pleased to be able to be part
Good for you. Yeah, that's awesome.
It was a really nice connection that we all had, and we didn't have to explain things to each other. We all knew everything. So a bit of a nod, a bit of a laugh, one word sort of thing, and everybody goes, "Yeah, we know." So that was good. So after that, my mother said, "Oh, what was it like?" And I said, "It was really cathartic. I really needed it." And she now doesn't speak to me, so I haven't heard from her. So she said to me, "I need to speak to the elders." I said, "Why?" She goes, "I don't think I can do this anymore." And so obviously they told her that, now that I'm an apostate, that's the end of that. So it makes me sad. She's 84. She'll die alone.
Mm-hmm.
She has none of her children with her.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't like to die alone. That's a terrible thing. And I just think, and I did send her an SMS and said, "Your decision. I don't think God would want you to die on your own. But if that's what you choose to do, that's your choice." So I'm sort of at peace with that. So I imagine the next time I hear will be maybe when she's passed, and somebody hopefully will call me and let me know. It's sad. Like if I think about it too much, I get very sad. But at the same time, it's a lot less stress instead of like what we talked about before, that hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. It's a lot more stressful than just a blanket. This is how we are going to be.
Are you sad for her, or are you sad for yourself?
I think both, maybe. I think I'm sad for her because who wants to be in their deathbed and have nobody, not have their children around? I think that's sad for her.
It is sad, but it's a reflection of her life.
Yeah, and that's what she's chosen. And as I said to her, okay, I went to this protest. I went to this protest. You know why it was good for my soul. I said, "Do you think I'm really at your age going to try and get you out of your religion? I have no interest in trying to stop her from being a JW. She would have nothing in her life, absolutely nothing. I have no interest. I'm not, she can do whatever she wants to do." So, but there's such a big thing of, I don't know, that how terrible I am as a person. It just makes me laugh.
No, this has been coming up a lot, so I'll just go ahead and share it. It's the frog and the scorpion. I don't know if that's something that people in other countries talk about, or if that's just an American thing. I have no idea. But so this is like a kid's fable or whatever. But so the scorpion needs to get across the river and approaches a frog and says, "Hey, frog, will you take me across the river?" Frog says, "You're a scorpion. you're probably going to sting me and kill me. So why would I do that? The scorpion says, well, if we get out in the middle of the water and I sting you, we're both going to die. So I have no, I've got skin in this game too, right? So there's no reason for me to do that. I just need help across the river. I appreciate it. And of course, the frog says, oh, hey, yeah, sounds reasonable, right? So, of course, the scorpion hops on the frog. They get halfway across the water. The scorpion stings the frog. And the frog says, why did you do that? And the scorpion says, because I'm a scorpion. It's in my nature. Mm-hmm. Jehovah's Witnesses are scorpions. They sting. Yeah. They shun. Right. Shunning is in the DNA from the beginning to the end of their lives. It's who they are. Yeah. Shunning is their go-to move. We shunned the kids around us growing up in school. We shunned our true selves individually as Jehovah's Witnesses. Some of us, myself, who came in, I was like 8 when my parents became witnesses, shunned our worldly relatives because they were now evil and a threat, and then you get shunned on the back end when you leave. Shunning is everything that Jehovah's Witnesses stand for. It's who they are. They shun. They even shun people that don't have to be shunned in the congregation. Like you said earlier, somebody goes to college. There's no reason to be shunned, and yet they shun anyway.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. It's only when you step out and you're looking from the outside in, you can see the ridiculousness of it. And and the cruelty of it, not just it's cruel. And it's cruel to her in the end. It's cruel to her in the end as well.
Yes.
But she chooses to stay with it.
Yeah, that's part of the whole scorpion and the frog story is, the scorpion went down too.
Yeah.
Right? People will do a lot of things that don't even help themselves just because it's in their nature. It would be in so many Jehovah's Witnesses' best interests to still have some sort of relationship with their kids, especially when they're older. They choose not to. And hey, that's your choice. Okay. You're actually choosing we also have to admit they're cult victims too, right? And so they've been influenced to do this, but it's just who they are, and it's going to happen. I mean, it's almost inevitable. I know a lot of people do a lot of things to try to maintain relationships with the witnesses in their lives. And I understand why people do. We all want to have our parents in our lives. We all want to have healthy and particularly an idealized version of who we wish they were. But who they actually are, if they're Jehovah's Witnesses, there are certain things that come along with that territory. And very likely, in the end, despite our best efforts and whatever, I'm sure you were a wonderful daughter to her, she's going to shun you anyway. Eventually, it's going to happen.
Yeah, you're right.
It's just what they do.
And, I think I had to come to that acceptance as well, because
absolutely.
Like you said, you're forever trying to chase that love.
Yes.
And if it's not there, it's not there. And in the end, it hurts you as well. So,
it does.
I probably came to that later than my sisters, who decided earlier on that it was better for their own mental health and their own emotional well-being to cut my mother off. And I think that's great. And I've sort of come to that as the last one, the slower one, obviously.
Well, everybody does things on their own timelines. And,
Correct.
Everybody has their own reasons for doing things. And it was sweet of you to try to, I think you can, at the end of the day, say you gave your best. You did what you were trying to be who you want to be. And she doesn't want that. She rejected that. That's her. That's on her. It's her choice.
Exactly.
So, it's one thing to leave because, you mentioned that you started seeing some things that didn't add up at a point. It's one thing to leave because you've been abused in the organization and nobody did a thing. That's one thing. But there's also a lot of doctrines and things there that come along with that. And, the waking up process often has many steps to it. So it's one thing to walk away from it, but it's another thing to then wake up to the realities of what it was. So I guess what was that process like for you, waking up to the realities of what you had been involved in? Did that take some time for you
Oh,
to
a
see,
long
or
time.
did you
Very
dive
long.
right into it?
Nope, it took a long time.
Okay.
A long time. It was funny because, like I said, I think we spoke earlier. When I left, there were no Facebook pages. There was the internet, but I didn't look at apostate things on the internet. So even when I left, I wasn't looking at apostate stuff because of somebody looking over your shoulder. And so I had no support networks and people to speak to, sort of to unpack stuff. So I think for a long time I was, it's probably still true. It's probably still true. I don't want it. Oh, what about if Armageddon comes? So there was a lot of stuff happening there, and that went around in my head for a while. And then I think that what I did do, which was interesting, was because of my line of work as an interpreter, I would work, say, at a conference, not a JW, anything to do with JWs, but at a conference where there would be also JW interpreters in my team. So I would say to the coordinator of the interpreters, oh, look, if so-and-so JW doesn't want to work with me, that's fine. I understand. I would excuse them for being awful and shunning me. Or if there was a lunch table, we're having lunch and I walked up and there's JWs there, I wouldn't sit down for them. So I still had this mentality of, I don't know if it was they were right and I was wrong. Maybe it was that, because I would do all these things to make sure I kept them comfortable. I look back now and I go, what was I thinking? And that's really only changed in the last probably 5 or 6 years, where I go, well, you don't like me, whatever, I don't care. But, for a long time I was just doing things, or I'd say to people, oh, no, it's fine. It's a fine religion. I just don't want to be part of it anymore. So what that is, I don't know, whether it's not wanting to think about it, whether it's not knowing where to go next. But then once I started sort of getting a little bit more information, Crisis of Conscience book, which I bought and then put on my shelf and looked at for a while because I was too scared to read it, then I started going, okay. And then I talked to my husband, who's not religious at all. And I talked to him about, some of the religious doctrines and practices we had, and he looked at me like quizzically going, what the? And then because of that, I was able to, it took a while because there's so much emotion attached to it. And you've got to really make this determined effort to sit back and look at it objectively, which is really hard to do. It's very hard to do, especially when you know that the end of that process is, how many years have I just wasted? I've wasted 32 years, and you've got to accept that that was just, and I think that's hard too, where you go, oh my God, all the time that I just hung on to it and wouldn't let it go. So I think it was a very slow process, and just doing a lot more reading, and then just getting onto the internet and listening to more people, and, and then just slowly going, oh yeah, okay, oh yeah, well, that's ridiculous. Now I think about that. That doesn't make any sense at all. Have I gone in deep into a lot of the doctrines? No, because now I just go, well, if A doesn't make sense, then the rest of them are not going to make sense, or if is it ridiculous, then it goes without saying the rest will be just as ridiculous. So now I don't have any belief in God or anything like that. So once I think it's in your head, it's almost like you've got to make this determined decision to step away from the emotions of it all.
Well, I think part of that determined decision is to value yourself. So again, back to the shame. So you're tiptoeing around the Jehovah's Witnesses that you work with because you've been made to feel like this dirty, awful person who you couldn't live up to the religion because there's something wrong with you, but they could. And so good for them. It's fine. It's nice. It's just not for me because I'm such a terrible, dirty human being, or whatever the case may be. Instead of saying, wait a minute, they're the ones with a problem. They're the ones that shun. Shunning is an action that one does to another person. It's not something that someone necessarily deserves. It's something that someone does to somebody. And though that's on them, you know, but we felt responsible for everything because we were just such bad people. When you can start to value yourself, no, I'm not the one who's doing something here. They're doing something by shunning me. They're the ones with narrow, intolerant beliefs, not me. I'm the one who's open and loving. They're the ones that don't know love. They're the ones that are judgmental and bigoted and so many different things. That's them. That's not me.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. You're quite right. It's all about that self-worth and just being, you know, made to feel small.
Oh, so small.
And not having to sit in that, which I sat in for quite some time, to be honest.
Well, yeah. And I mean, you know, when I work with people in my practice, it's going through all the different ways. You know, I've alluded to gaslighting several times because there's so many different ways that gaslighting is done. And, you know, each and every one of those can be seen within Jehovah's Witnesses in the organization, the whole purpose of which is to make you distrust yourself and feel confused and stupid and crazy. And to think that the person doing the gaslighting has it all together and has it right. So to put them on a pedestal while self-flagellating and feeling like nothing, and just all the cognitive distortions, all the gaslighting, everything that comes from that, it's honestly, when you break it down and start looking at it, sadly, it's masterfully done. Jehovah's Witnesses have had over a century to perfect the distancing of people from their own identity and the breaking down of the human spirit. And they're just really, really good at it.
Yeah, they are.
It's sad. That's not something you want to be good at, but they are. And that's what they did to all of us. And then, you know, and everyone's on their journey, and we all have our base personality and our base psychology and our family history and everything. But it's just, they just really do a number on human beings. And it's so sad. There's no benefit to any, it really doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't benefit anybody, really. It's not doing any good in this world, period.
That's right.
It's all for nothing. It's all for a fairy tale, a dystopian fairy tale.
Yeah. So I quite often listen regularly to different things, ex-JW things, which my husband says to me, why are you still listening to them? And I go, I don't know. It just makes me, that jump that I've had where I go, okay, now I'm the outside looking in and seeing what it's like. It just helps you to reaffirm that. I think it's nice to get that, the affirmations and that reaffirming that, yeah, this is okay. I'm not alone. There's lots of us here and lots of us that have seen the light. And, yeah, this is good. This is good. So I think that's works for me really well. Just keeps me
processing.
You know, processing, yeah, exactly. And things become a lot easier as time goes on. Like that first the first few steps of processing is very difficult because there's so many layers, there's so much rubbish and it keeps you down. So for anybody who's going through it, I think if you get through those really tough parts and then it becomes a lot easier and you process things a lot more quickly and you get to the point where you want to be and you look back and you go, thank God for that.
Yeah, there's a point at which there's a point at which you look back and can't believe where you once stood and where you once were. It's unfathomable to me at this point to see that I was that person, really, because that's so not me. But you know, it was the programming. Again, back to the, you know, it's the environment that created certain predictable results within us all. It wasn't us. It's environmental, you know, the issues that it come from that too.
And I still spend a lot of time going, this is who I am. My default reactions or thoughts are not necessarily who I am. So I've learned to go, okay, that's how you react to that. And that's how you think of that. Is that, oh no, actually step back from that. Let's start again. So I think that's always will probably be with me, I suppose, because that's what you learn when you're young. But it's just being cognizant of that and going, that's okay that I have this ridiculous default reaction, but just step back on it and think twice and maybe take another direction. And I think that shouldn't sort of hold us back either, because maybe we can't do anything about that except work with it, which works once you become more aware of it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, and I'm not selling this to sell T-shirts. It's not even made yet. But I told my wife this week, I don't know, just after, a day of doing what I do in my coaching practice, that, I think I'm going to make a shirt and it's going to say, live out, people talk about thinking outside of the box, live outside of the default. Because I think a lot of people in life, and it's not just ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, it's just people in general, they're living a default. They were set on a path when they were 18 and they went to college, or their parents convinced them that they needed to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, or they're following some example that was in their family, or for us, it was following the cult. And the cult gave us a lot of defaults in our lives. And we get to decide to change that dynamic later in life when we wake up. If we want, we don't have to live a default life. Just because it's there doesn't mean it can't be changed.
Yeah, that's right.
And we all end up doing it.
Yeah.
To some degree, and so it's something that it's a very human thing.
Yeah.
And so I just to encourage people to do that. Is there anything in particular so today, you said that your mom doesn't talk to you anymore. Is there anything that, you had thought of that you would want to say to her if you had a chance, or has it been said, hey, you made the choice? But I mean, is there anything you would want to say to her or anyone else that shuns you at this point if you had a chance to actually have an open forum?
Maybe, hi, you should meet me, because this is who I am now, because you didn't know me before. And, when you know me, when you get to know me, who I am now, I'm actually really nice. I'm not evil. I'm not, immoral and whatever they imagine you are. I'm actually really a nice person, and I'm happy. So thank you. Thank you for getting me down this path, because I'm actually happy with who I am.
I could not love that more. And I love the part about you might like to actually meet me, because it's sad. I remember coming to the realization myself that my parents will never know the real me. And the real me is such a better me than I was as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm so much happier. I'm kinder. I'm nicer. I actually like people. I'm not judgmental.
I know.
I'm free. It's a shame they will never get to see that. But, hey, that's they're living their lives. So.
And you're right. That was one of the biggest things, being so judgmental of everybody. My husband used to look at me and go, what are you doing? And it was just there. So, just saying, actually, and the other thing, people are really nice.
Yeah.
People out there are really good people. I like people. It's good. Once you can free yourself of all that emotional rubbish, it opens up your world.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
My husband has been very, very good, in dragging me along sometimes and just helping me and just providing that other perspective, which is what you need sometimes. Otherwise you get stuck in your own head, and you need somebody to just look at that, give you that other perspective. And, he is just a very happy man all the time, and he just says, just love each other. That's all we need to do. That's all we need in life. Be happy, love each other. I'm like, I like that. That's easy. That's simple. I can do that. It works.
It's a lot easier than having a million rules and 1,000 different books and scriptures and deciding who you're going to love and who you're not going to love. It's so much freer. Is there anything for you? Is there one thing that you've learned since you've left or woken up? Is there something that has made a really big impact for you? any lessons you've learned or anything that's really been big for you and setting you free?
I think maybe going back to that people are good.
Ah,
There's
yeah.
that people, and I've always found it hard to make friends, and I don't know how much of that is just my innate personality and how much is around my upbringing, but I've held back from a lot of people, and I still struggle with that now. But I realize people are good, and people like you, and people want the best for you. And that's a big thing. That's nice. That's what we all need as humans, is just to be liked by people and to like people. And I think that's, once again, one of those, it frees you up to do that. And it frees you up to see the enjoyment of life and to see how wonderful people are. They don't have to be following a God, and they don't have to be a part of an organization, or they can be a part of another organization, preferably. But people, we all just want the same. We all have the basic need of being loved.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
what we're here on this earth for,
Absolutely.
So planning to live the rest of my life without that cloud is a good thing. It's good for your mental, emotional well-being. You can't go through life dragging these things along with you. It's just no good for you.
No. And yes, it is absolutely 100% growing up one of Jehovah's Witnesses makes it very difficult. It's something I work with everyone on. It is very hard for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses to make friends. It's a complicated thing. There's a lot of reasons behind it. But yeah, I mean, just think about from being a child and not being, actively pushing people away your whole life. It's difficult. But it can be better. So for yourself, so you've got this freedom now, you've got this new life. What do you appreciate about your life since not just leaving, but leaving and waking up? What do you appreciate about your life today? And is there anything in particular that you have that, I don't know, you dream of or you would like to have in your life?
I think I've said it before. It's just feeling that weight come off my shoulders. It's empowering. It's empowering, and it doesn't mean that it's always that easy. I think things always pop up, but I've learnt over many years to be able to work that out in my own head, and it takes a lot less time to do that now, and I have people that I can speak to, and I have people on the side with me who may not necessarily understand because they've never been a JW, but they're very open to me, just blah, whatever I need to say to them, and very supportive. And I think that's what you need. In terms of what I dream of, I think I've got a pretty good life now. I don't think I have anything I need. I've got a great hubby, great kids, live in a lovely place. What else is there?
I've heard dogs and maybe a bird.
Oh, I've got 2 greyhounds.
Okay.
They make me very happy. So that's all I need.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you telling your story. I think it's definitely going to help others out there as well.